Congratulations, you've just found the number one over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and founder of The Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, amazing, capable bodies they love for the rest of their lives. All right, beautiful people, let's go. What if I told you that one of the biggest health problems facing Americans over 50 is not, in fact, obesity, but instead it's a lack of muscle? Now, to some of you, that may sound strange because when most people think about health problems, especially here in the US, we think about heart disease and diabetes and cancer, obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Nobody ever really says, you know what America really needs is more muscle. But you know what? Maybe they should. Because while everybody's obsessing about weight, I don't think enough people are talking about strength. And that may be one of the biggest mistakes we're making. So when people look in the mirror, they usually ask one question, like, how much do I weigh? But I think there's a much more important question we can ask ourselves, and that is, how much muscle am I carrying? Because here's the deal. Two people can weigh the exact same. One can be strong, capable, metabolically healthy, energetic, and independent. And the other one can be weak and fragile, inflamed, and one bad fall away from a major health crisis. Same weight, completely, radically different futures. And the difference often comes down to muscle or lack thereof. And you know what I find fascinating is most people don't wake up one morning and realize, oh no, I've lost a bunch of muscle. Nobody notices the first pound or the second or the fifth. It's happening quietly in the background, like year after year and decade after decade, until one day life starts feeling harder. The stairs seem steeper, the groceries feel heavier, the aches and pains, they show up more often. Energy starts disappearing, balance starts to go, and things that used to be easy just aren't so easy anymore. And most people assume, well, I guess I'm just getting old. Okay, maybe. Or maybe you're just getting weaker, and those two are not the same thing. In fact, one of the biggest lies we've accepted about aging is that weakness is normal. I'm here to tell you it's not. Common? Absolutely. Normal? Definitely not. Because I've met 75-year-olds who can outwork people 20 years younger. I've met women in their 60s who are stronger in their 60s than they were in their 40s. I've met people in their 70s who are hiking mountains, traveling the world, playing with grandkids, and living fully. Not because they found some magic fairy dust or some magic supplement, not because they discovered the perfect diet, but because they built and protected muscle. So today we're going to talk about what I call the great muscle shortage, why America doesn't just have an obesity problem, it has a muscle problem. Or I guess I should more correctly say we have a lack of muscle problem. I'm going to talk about why losing weight isn't enough, why muscle may be the closest thing we have to a longevity superpower, and why the strength you build today could determine the quality of the next 30 years of your life. Because after 50, the goal isn't or shouldn't be getting smaller. The goal should be getting stronger. So people, whip up your protein smoothies and let's dive in. All right, so let's start with this question. If somebody gains 30 pounds, do people notice? Of course they notice. Of course they do. The scale notices, the mirror notices, their clothes notice, everybody notices. Fat gets attention. But muscle loss? I think muscle loss is sneaky. Muscle loss is silent. It's insidious. Muscle loss happens right under our noses, and most people never see it happening. They don't see it coming. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because while obesity has become one of the most talked about health issues in America, almost nobody's talking about the fact that millions of people are quietly becoming weaker every single year, especially in our age bracket. Not just older, but weaker. And I'm here to tell you, those are not the same thing. See, one of the reasons muscle loss flies under the radar is because it doesn't happen overnight. It's not dramatic. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, wow, I think I lost 10 pounds of muscle while I was sleeping. No, it happens gradually. A pound here, a half a pound there, year after year, decade after decade. And because it's happening slowly, I think people just assume that it's a part of aging. But here's what's really happening. Starting as early as our 30s, we begin losing muscle mass. And then after 50, this process accelerates. And if we aren't actively fighting back, we can lose a shocking amount of muscle over the next few decades. Now, I want to be careful here. I want to strongly contend that those of us in our 50s and 60s are not losing muscle because we are aging. We're losing muscle because we stop sending a signal to our bodies that we need it. Now, Here's where things get even more interesting. I think a lot of people assume that muscle loss is primarily a cosmetic issue. They think, oh no, my arms got smaller, or my butt disappeared, my shoulders aren't what they used to be. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is what happens when muscle loss starts showing up in daily life. That's when people notice, not so much in the mirror, but in their capabilities. Suddenly, getting off the floor seems a whole lot harder than it used to be. Carrying in groceries is harder. Lifting luggage into the overhead bin is harder. Walking long distance is harder. Climbing stairs gets harder. Playing with grandkids is harder. Recovering from injuries is harder. Everything just becomes a little more difficult, and then a little more difficult, and then a little more difficult, until one day people start saying, I just don't have the energy that I used to, or I'm slowing down, or one of my personal favorite, getting old sucks. Well, maybe. Or maybe you're experiencing the consequences of decades of muscle loss. Because here's the deal. Most people don't realize they're losing muscle until life starts getting harder. And by then, they've often lost far more than they realize. Now, let's make this even more interesting. The scale can actually hide this problem. A lot of people assume, well, my weight hasn't changed, so I guess everything must be fine. Maybe, but not necessarily, because body weight can stay exactly the same while body composition changes dramatically. Imagine this. Look at it this way. Over 10 years, somebody loses 10 pounds of muscle and gains 10 pounds of body fat, right? So the scale doesn't move, but I'm here to tell you their health changes completely. Their metabolism slows, their strength declines, their balance worsens, their insulin sensitivity drops, their risk of injury rises, their ability to remain independent is going to decrease. Same weight, different body, way different future. And nobody notices because the scale isn't telling the whole story. And this is why I get so frustrated when people obsess over scale weight or weight loss as their primary measure of health, because weight is only one piece of the puzzle. And I would argue it's a tiny piece of the puzzle at that. So the question isn't what do you weigh, or at least it shouldn't be in my mind. A better question would be, what is your weight made of? Because after 50, what you're carrying matters far more than how much you're carrying. And that's where I think we've gotten the conversation a bit backwards here. We spent decades telling people to lose weight when what many of them really need to do is build muscle. Because if obesity is America's visible health problem, then muscle loss is America's invisible health problem. And invisible problems are often more dangerous. And speaking of dangerous, that brings up the topic that I don't think gets talked about enough, and that's the fact that being smaller, being skinnier, doesn't automatically mean being healthier. So let's talk about this. I think this is one of the biggest health myths out there, this idea that thin automatically means healthy. Because for decades, we've been conditioned to believe that body weight is the ultimate measure of health. If the scale goes down, good. The scale goes up, bad. End of discussion. But real life doesn't work that way. Your metabolism doesn't work that way. And honestly, I learned this lesson the hard way, because years ago, I was the poster child for what we call skinny fat. So maybe from a distance, I looked, I guess, reasonably healthy. I wasn't obese. I wasn't huge. I wasn't a guy people would point to and say, wow, that guy's really big, or that guy needs to lose a bunch of weight. But under the hood, a whole different story. I had very little muscle. I had way too much body fat. I had very poor metabolic health. And despite being, I guess, relatively light, I was heading straight towards a health disaster. In fact, that journey eventually led me to a 3-day hospital stay. I think I've told that story before on this podcast, but that was the wake-up call that changed my life. And that's why this topic is so important, because I think there are millions of people walking around today who aren't technically overweight, but they're still metabolically very unhealthy. They've got low muscle mass, they've got poor strength, they've got poor insulin sensitivity, they probably have low energy, they've got elevated body fat, they've got poor mobility. Yet, because they're not visibly overweight, nobody's sounding the alarm, including themselves. And guys, that is dangerous. That's a red flag, because being light and being healthy are not the same thing. Let me say that again. Being light and being healthy are not the same thing. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes people make after 50 is becoming obsessed with getting smaller. Smaller waist, smaller number on the scale, smaller clothing size, smaller. Well, I'm here to say, in our age demographic, smaller most often means weaker. It means frailer. Meanwhile, they're losing the very thing that's keeping them healthy. That's muscle. And Here's the irony. Many people successfully lose weight and actually become more fragile. They diet aggressively. They lose muscle. They slow their metabolism. They get weaker. And then they celebrate because the scale moves southward. But the scale doesn't know the difference between losing body fat and losing muscle. It's just reporting a number, a gravity number. That's it. So let's do a little thought experiment here. Imagine two women. Both are 65 years old. Both weigh, we'll just say, 145 pounds. Woman number one strength trains 3 times per week. She's got good muscle mass. She's got strong bones. She's got good balance, good mobility. She can carry groceries. She can hike. She can play with the grandkids. She can lift mulch up off the ground and carry it to the gardening bed. She can get up off the floor without assistance. Woman number two also weighs 145 pounds, but she's got significantly less muscle, more body fat, less strength. She's got poor balance. She's got less mobility. She is one bad fall away from some very, very serious problems. Same weight, but I'm here to tell you a very, very different future. So let's look at two men. One weighs 190 and he's got solid muscle mass. He's got strength and fitness. The other guy weighs 190, but he's lost muscle for decades and he's replaced it with body fat. Again, same weight, completely different health trajectory. This is why I hate it when people say, Kevin, I just want to lose weight. Because that's the wrong goal, or at least it's an incomplete goal. The goal shouldn't be how small can I get, how light can I become. The goal should be how strong, fit, capable, and resilient can I become. And that's a completely different conversation. And honestly, it's a much more empowering conversation. Think about it. After 50, the real threat isn't carrying a couple extra pounds. The real threat is becoming physically fragile. The real threat is losing the ability to do the things you love. The real threat is becoming dependent on other people because your body no longer supports the life that you want to live. And that's exactly why muscle matters so much, because muscle isn't just something that makes you look better. Muscle changes everything. It changes your metabolism. It changes your blood sugar, your energy, your mobility. It changes your independence and your longevity. In fact, I would argue that muscle is one of the most important organs in the human body because muscle isn't just cosmetic tissue. It's longevity tissue. So this concept of muscle as an organ of longevity, actually changed the way I think about health. Because for most of my life, I thought muscle was about appearance. Bigger arms, bigger chest, broad shoulders, looking good at the beach, the stuff that most people associate maybe with meatheads or bodybuilding. But the more I've learned, the more I've come to believe something very, very different. Muscle isn't cosmetic tissue. Muscle is longevity tissue. As Dr. Gabriel Lyon is very famous for saying, muscle is the organ of longevity. In fact, if I could wave a magic wand and give every single person over 50 one health superpower, I wouldn't lower your cholesterol. I wouldn't improve your VO2 max. I wouldn't even help you lose 20 pounds. I'd give you more muscle. Because muscle impacts almost every aspect of healthy aging, and most people have no idea. Let's start with metabolism. You hear people say it all the time. My metabolism isn't what it used to be, or my metabolism is slowed down, or my metabolism is broken. And you know what one of the biggest drivers of metabolic health is? It's muscle, because muscle is metabolically active tissue. The more muscle you carry, the more calorie your body burns, the more energy your body requires, the more metabolically flexible you become. Next, let's talk about blood sugar, because this is huge. Your muscles act like a giant storage tank for glucose. When you eat carbohydrates, your body breaks that down into glucose, and all that healthy muscle tissue helps pull that glucose out of the bloodstream to store it where it belongs. In other words, muscle helps regulate blood sugar. Muscle improves insulin sensitivity. Muscle helps protect against metabolic disease. Think about that for a minute. The thing most people think of as gym tissue is actually one of your body's most important metabolic organs. Now let's talk about something that becomes increasingly important as we age: falls. I think nobody, it's kind of a downer subject, right? We don't want to think about falls. But look, falls are a major reason that older adults lose their independence. And what protects against falls? Strength does, muscle does, balance and coordination, the ability to react, the ability to catch yourself, all things that are heavily influenced by your muscle mass. Because when you're stronger, you're harder to knock down and you're not going to fall down as easily. And by the way, when you get stronger, anytime you increase muscle tissue, you're increasing bone density as well. So if you do fall, you're more likely to recover. Now, let's go another step further. What happens if you get sick or injured or hospitalized? This is where muscle becomes even more important. I want you to think of muscle as your savings account, a physical savings account. When life throws you a challenge, and look, it most certainly will, you make withdrawals from that savings account. Got an illness? Withdraw. A surgery? Withdraw. An injury? Withdraw. A period of inactivity? Withdraw. And here's the problem. Most people enter their 60s and 70s with a darn near empty account. They spent decades losing muscle without replacing it. So when adversity shows up, and adversity will always show up, they really don't have much reserve. There's nothing in that account. But people who have spent years building strength, they've got something to draw from. They got resilience, they have margin, they got options. And that's one of the reasons stronger people tend to age better. Not because bad things don't happen, but because they're better equipped when they do. Now, here's a fun way to think about muscle. Most people think muscle helps you live longer. I think muscle helps you live better longer. And that's an important distinction, right? That distinction between your lifespan and your health span. Because what good is it to live to 90 if the last 20 years are spent struggling to get out of a chair, or struggling to carry groceries, or struggling to travel, or struggling to do the things that you love? That's not what we're chasing here at the Silver Edge. We're after capability. We're after independence. We're after freedom. The ability to live life on your terms. And muscle is one of the biggest predictors of that freedom, which is why I like to look at it this way. I think that muscle isn't just something that you show off at the beach. It's something that keeps you out of a nursing home. And it's like Mark Ripito famously says, strong people are harder to kill. Or put another way, weak things break. Because after 50, muscle becomes less about appearance and more about function. Less about vanity and more about vitality. Less about looking strong and more about being strong. And yet, despite all of this, there are millions of people in our age demographic that are still avoiding strength training because of beliefs that simply aren't true. Beliefs that keep them weak. Beliefs that keep them fragile. Beliefs that are quietly accelerating the aging process. And unfortunately, some of these myths are keeping us weak, fragile, and aging faster than we need to. So let's have fun and let's bust a couple of these common myths here. Myth number 1, I'm too old to build muscle. Come on, man. Really? This is probably the biggest one. I hear it all the time. Kevin, if I just started when I was 30, or Kevin, maybe when I was younger, or Kevin, that ship has sailed. No, nope, no way. It has not sailed. Now, are you going to build muscle as easily at age 65 as you would have at 25? Probably not, but that's not the question. The question is, can you still build muscle after 50, 60, 70, even 80? And the answer is absolutely yes, you can. I've seen it happen countless times. Men and women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s getting stronger, building muscle, improving balance, improving mobility, improving confidence, improving quality of life. And here's the thing. Your body doesn't know how old you are. It responds to stimulus. Give it a reason to adapt, and it will. Maybe not as quickly as it once did, but it still will. The real risk isn't starting too late. The real risk is believing that you're too old and never starting at all. All right, myth number 2. Okay, let's go here. I don't want to get bulky. Okay, time for me to talk to you ladies out there, because I have heard this one approximately 47 billion times. It goes something like this. Kevin, I want to get toned, but I don't want to get too bulky. First of all, let's retire the word toned. Tone is a goofy word. It doesn't really mean anything. Toned is just muscle. That's all it is. When people say they want to be toned, what they really mean is, I want more muscle and less body fat. That's the definition. And second, none of you ladies out there are going to accidentally become a bodybuilder. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, honey, we've got a problem. I was trying to get stronger and get toned, and somehow I turned into She-Ra or to Lady Hulk. Look, that's not how this works. In fact, I'll say this. If you ladies were to pay me $10,000 a month to help you get big and strong and bulky, and you and I tried as hard as we could, and now in this imaginary scenario, we're not using any steroids. We're doing this all naturally. You know what would probably happen? We'd probably fail, and I'd have to refund your money. I'd have to give you back the $10,000 a month you paid me because we couldn't get you bulky even after we tried as hard as we could. Look, building significant amounts of muscle to make a woman bulky is going to take years of focused effort. It's going to take years of consistent training and very intentional nutrition. And most of the time, it's going to take some very exceptional genetics and very, very commonly, also a little pharmaceutical help. What strength training actually does for most women over 50 is it improves their body composition. It improves posture. It improves bone density. It improves confidence and metabolism. It improves your strength. In other words, it gives you exactly what you want, that lean, quote unquote, toned look. All right. Myth number 3, walking is enough. Now, before anybody gets upset about this, just to be clear, I love walking. You know I love walking. I recommend walking to every single client and to everybody. I think walking is fantastic. It's good for heart health and stress management and blood sugar control. It's great for recovery. I think you should walk. I think you should aim for a goal of a minimum of 7,000 steps every single day. But walking is not strength training. And strength is what we're talking about today. Walking maintains many things, and it's wonderful. Strength training builds things, and those are different outcomes. So if your goal is to preserve muscle, build muscle, maintain strength, and remain independent, you need resistance. You need challenge. You need your muscles to have a reason to stay on your body, because muscle follows the same rule as your favorite employees. You stop giving them meaningful work, eventually they're going to leave, right? All right, myth number 4, I just want to lose weight. Okay. So I think that this is probably the most damaging myth of all because it sounds reasonable. People come to me and they say, hey, Kev, I just want to lose 20 pounds. Look, I get it. But here's what I wish more people would ask. What do I want those 20 pounds to be? Because if you lose 20 pounds of muscle, congratulations, you're lighter, you're smaller, and you are significantly worse off. If, on the other hand, you lose 20 pounds of body fat while maintaining or gaining muscles, come on, now we're talking. That's a completely, radically different outcome. And this is why I don't get excited when somebody tells me they lost weight. I get excited when they tell me they're stronger, sleeping better, moving better, feeling better, building muscle. Those are the things that predict a better future. And then finally, myth number 5, isn't strength training dangerous? Come on, people. This one drives me nuts because you know what's actually dangerous? Being weak, being unable to get up off the floor, being unable to catch yourself when you trip, being unable to carry your own luggage, being unable to pick up your grandchild, being unable to recover from a surgery or an illness. That's what's dangerous. And I hate when I see these probably well-meaning people say things like, here are 5 exercises that no one over 50 should do. BS. I'm just going complete and total BS on that. And usually the most common things here are the dreaded deadlift or the dreaded barbell back squat. Nobody over 50 should do these. Look, those are 2 of the most powerful functional movements you could possibly do. Strength training done properly is one of the safest and most effective things that an older adult can do. The goal isn't to become Arnold Schwarzenegger or She-Ra. It's not to become some sort of a power lifter. I mean, cool if that's your goal. The goal isn't to deadlift a pickup truck. The goal is to become more capable, more resilient, more independent, more prepared for life. And here's what all of these myths have in common. They convince people to accept weakness as normal. But weakness is not a requirement of aging. It's the result of choices, habits, and environments that slowly rob us of our strength. And speaking of environment, let's talk about why modern life seems perfectly designed to steal your muscle if you're not paying attention. So if muscle's so important, why are so many people losing it? Well, if you happen to be in your 80s or 90s, part of that answer is absolutely aging. But honestly, I think modern life deserves a lot more of the blame than it gets, because whether we realize it or not, we've created a world that systematically removes almost every reason to be physically strong. Think about your great-grandparents, or heck, even your grandparents. Life required strength, not gym strength, but life strength. Those people, our great-grandparents, they carried things, they built things, they lifted things, they walked places, they probably worked with their hands, they maintained property, they did physical labor. Movement wasn't something they scheduled, movement was life. Compare that to today. We've engineered movement out of existence. Need to go somewhere? Drive. Need some groceries? Have them delivered. Need dinner? DoorDash it. Need entertainment? Sit on the couch and let Netflix ask you if you're still alive every 4 episodes. We've built this world of incredible convenience. And look, convenience is wonderful until it starts costing us our strength, because your body is incredibly efficient. If it notices that you don't need muscle, guess what? It gets rid of it. Think about that. Muscle is expensive tissue. It requires energy. It requires nutrients. It requires maintenance. So if your body realizes, hey, we're not really using this anymore, it's going to start downsizing. Kind of like a company cutting unnecessary expenses. And that's exactly what's happening to millions of people. Not necessarily because they're lazy, but because modern life no longer demands much from them physically. So let's talk about another muscle thief, and that's chronic dieting. This is a huge one. And honestly, it's one of the reasons I spend so much time helping people just get off that chronic dieting merry-go-round. Because when most people lose weight, they don't just lose fat. They lose muscle too, especially if they're eating too little protein or doing excessive cardio or they're not strength training. So think about how crazy this is. Someone spends 6 months dieting, the scale goes down, everybody celebrates, there's high fives all around. But underneath the surface, they may have lost a meaningful amount of the very tissue that keeps them healthy, muscle. Then 6 months later, they're going to gain all that weight back, but except now they have less muscle than before, which means they have a slower metabolism, which means they have less strength, less resilience, and they're in a worse starting point for their next diet. This is one of the reasons why so many people feel like their metabolism is broken. It's not broken. They simply spent years losing muscle. Now let's connect this to our last episode. You remember when we talked about in that episode, the food industry. Well, here's another problem. Most Americans are dramatically under-consuming protein. We're eating plenty of calories, most of us, plenty of processed foods, plenty of refined carbohydrates, plenty of convenience foods, but not enough of the raw materials required to build and maintain muscle. And after 50, that's a big, big problem because muscle becomes harder to maintain as we age, which means protein becomes even more important. Yet most people are eating cereal and bagels for breakfast. They're having sandwiches for lunch. They got snack foods in the afternoon and whatever's easiest for dinner. And then they wonder why they're losing strength. Look, your body can't build a house if it doesn't have the lumber, and it can't maintain muscle if it doesn't have the protein. So let's switch gears here a little bit. I'm going to talk about another thing that I think modern life has stolen from us, and that's challenge. This is a big one because muscle responds to challenge. It responds to resistance. It responds to being asked to do hard things. And modern life is increasingly designed to remove hard things. Everything is optimized for your comfort. Everything is optimized for ease. Everything is optimized for convenience. But here's the problem. Your comfort zone is where muscle goes to die. It's a graveyard. Not just physical muscle, but your mental muscle, your emotional muscle, your spiritual muscle. The entire human organism becomes weaker when it's never challenged, which is why I think one of the most powerful things a person over 50 can do is intentionally choose difficulty. Lift weights, carry heavy things, walk hills, learn new skills, challenge yourself. Not because, suffering is noble or anything like that, but because adaptation requires resistance. And here's the irony. The very things that modern life is trying to protect us from, effort, challenge, discomfort, those are often the things that keep us the strongest. Which brings us to one of my favorite ways to think about strength, because strength isn't really about the gym. Strength isn't really about bigger muscles or looking good in the mirror or in your bikini. Strength is about freedom. And the stronger you are, the more freedom you have. So let's talk about this strength gap. Because I think most people, when they think about strength, they think about the gym. They think about barbells and dumbbells, and maybe they think about power lifters or bodybuilders or dudes grunting loudly while they're lifting the things that appear completely unnecessary. And that's unfortunate because strength has one of the worst public relation problems in health and fitness. Most people think strength is about looking impressive. I think strength is about freedom. In fact, the older I get, the more convinced I become that strength is one of the greatest forms of freedom a human being can possess because strength gives you options. Think about it. When you're strong enough, you can carry your own groceries. You can load your own luggage. You can travel without worrying about whether you'll be able to handle your suitcase. You can move some furniture. You can play with your grandkids. You can get up and down off the floor. You can hike that trail. You can take that trip. You can live independently. Strength gives you options. Weakness removes them. That's the strength gap. It's that gap between what life requires and what you want to do and what your body can currently do. Now, here's the thing. When you're 25, you can get away with a pretty big strength gap. Youth covers a whole bunch of sins. You can be weak and still function reasonably well because you're young. Your body compensates and recovery is faster and everything is just a lot more forgiving. But after 50, that gap, that strength gap, it starts mattering like a lot because life doesn't stop demanding things from you. In fact, for many people, life starts demanding more. Maybe your kids are gone and now you want to travel or you want to play with your grandkids. You want to remain active. You want to maintain your independence, obviously. You want to enjoy your retirement. You want to keep doing the things that you love. And all of those things require capability, which means they require strength. So let's do a little thought experiment here. Imagine two 70-year-olds. The first one can carry a 50-pound suitcase. can walk several miles comfortably, can get up off the floor without any assistance, can lift a grandkid, can climb multiple flights of stairs without getting winded. And the second struggles with all of those things. Which person has more freedom? It's not even close. The strong person doesn't just have more muscle, they got more life, more experiences available to them, more opportunities, more confidence, more independence. That's what strength buys you. And here's the crazy part. Most people spend decades preparing financially for retirement. They build investment accounts and retirement accounts and savings accounts, and that's smart. You absolutely should. But almost nobody is building a strength account. And one day, that's going to be the account you need the most, because eventually there comes a moment when your body sends you a bill. So the question is, have you been making deposits? Every workout is a deposit. Every strength training session is a deposit. Every protein-rich meal is a deposit. Every walk is a deposit. Every year of consistency is a deposit. And those deposits compound, just like money. Maybe you don't notice much at first, but 20 years later, the difference is dramatic. One person can still do things that they love. The other is increasingly limited by what their body can no longer do. And that's why I think people completely misunderstand the purpose of strength training. The goal isn't to impress people. The goal isn't to look intimidating or to look fabulous in your swimwear. The goal isn't even to lift the heaviest weights in your gym. Although all those things might be cool, the real goal is freedom. It's the freedom to move, the freedom to travel, the freedom to play, the freedom to explore, the freedom to remain independent, freedom to say yes to opportunities instead of being limited by your body. Because here's something I want you to remember. Strength is not about the gym. It's not about the weight room. Strength is about the life waiting outside the weight room. And the stronger you become, the larger your world becomes. Which brings me to one of my favorite ways to think about muscle. Because if strength is freedom, then muscle is an investment, and every single day you're either building that investment or you're spending it. So think about it. When people talk about retirement planning, everybody understands that concept. We make deposits, we make small deposits, we make consistent deposits month after month and year after year, and eventually those deposits, they compound, right? And then one day you wake up, wow, all those little investments, they really added up. Nobody expects to become financially rich or wealthy after one deposit or a week of deposits or a month of deposits. They understand it takes time, and it takes consistency, and it takes patience. Well, muscle works pretty much the same way. And just like money, the real magic happens through compounding. Now, here's a mistake I see a lot of people making. They think about exercise in terms of immediate results. They're like, how much muscle did I gain this much? Or how much weight did I lose this week? Or why don't I look different yet? And they're focused on today's returns. But the biggest payoff, not today. In fact, the biggest payoff is decades later. I mean, this is a funny game, right? The whole strength training and eat healthy and healthy aging game, because like I love to say, you can do everything perfect today. You can have the best workout ever. You can eat perfectly. You can dial in your sleep and manage your stress and just do all the right things. And then the next morning you wake up and you look in the mirror and you step on the scale, nothing's different. And then the next day you do the exact same thing, right? You get your steps, you drink your water, you eat perfect, and then you look in the mirror and you step on the scale. The next day, nothing's changed, right? This is a long game that we're talking about here. But one day, whether you realize it or not, you're going to start living off the strength that you've built or suffering from the strength that you didn't. So look at it that way when we talk about this longer time horizon. So think about that. The 80-year-old who can still carry groceries, that's not luck. That's a retirement account. The 75-year-old who can travel wherever he wants to, that's a retirement account. The 85-year-old who can still get up off the floor unassisted, that's a really good retirement account paying dividends. The person who recovers quickly from surgery, retirement account. The person who remains independent longer, retirement account. All those things are the results of deposits that were made years earlier. So let me ask you this question then. If I told you there was an investment account that could help you maintain your independence, could reduce your injury risk, could improve the quality of your life, could increase your resilience, could support metabolic health, could improve your longevity, your lifespan and your health span, would you invest in it? Of course you would. You'd probably start immediately. Well, that account already exists. It's called muscle. And unlike your 401k, you can't wait until retirement to start funding it, because muscle doesn't work that way. It has to be built gradually, patiently, consistently over time. And here's the really good news. You don't need to become a fitness fanatic. You don't need to spend 2 hours a day in the gym. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. You simply need to start making regular deposits. 3 strength training sessions per week, deposits. Prioritize some protein, deposits. Walk every day, deposits. Take care of your body, deposits. And look, over time, those deposits begin to compound into something extraordinary. And I'm talking about strength and capability and confidence and freedom. Now let's make this personal. I want you to imagine yourself 20 years from now. Like seriously, take a second, picture yourself. What do you want that person to be able to do? Do you want to be able to travel, play with grandkids, maybe great grandkids? You want to still be working in your garden? You want to be able to take a walk down the beach? You want to carry your own luggage and put it in the overhead bin? You want to stay independent? You want to live without fear of becoming a burden? Then ask yourself this: what deposits am I making today to create that future? Because the future version of you is living off the decisions you're making right now. And one day that future version of you is going to either thank you or wish you had started sooner. Which brings us to the most important takeaway from this episode, because after everything we've discussed, I just want to reinforce this one simple but very powerful idea. After 50, our goal isn't to get smaller. Our goal is to get stronger. So let's bring this thing home. So if you've listened to this entire episode, if you're still with me, I hope that there's one idea that's permanently lodged in your brain, and that's this. After 50, muscle is no longer optional. It's not something reserved for bodybuilders. It's not something reserved for athletes. It's not something reserved for gym rats. It's a health issue. It's a longevity issue. It's a quality of life issue. And in many ways, it's an independence issue. Because when people think about aging well, they usually focus on things like living longer, avoiding disease, lowering cholesterol, improving blood work. And look, those things absolutely matter. But here's a question I want you to think about. What good is living to 90 if your body stops allowing you to fully participate in life at 70? What good is longevity without capability? What good is extra years if those years are spent struggling to do the things you love? That's not what we're after here. We're not just trying to extend life. We're trying to expand life. We're trying to create more years filled with energy, more years filled with freedom, more years filled with adventure, more years filled with possibility. And muscle plays a huge role in that, because muscle isn't just tissue. It's potential. It's capacity. It's resilience. It is freedom stored in your body. Think about that. Every pound of muscle you build is like adding another layer of protection against the aging process, another layer of resistance, another layer of capability, another layer of independence. And the beautiful thing, it's never too late to start. I know somebody listening right now is probably thinking, Kev, oh man, I wish I had started 20 years ago. Sure, don't we all? But the second best time from 20 years ago is today. Because here's a reality. 5 years from now, you're going to be 5 years older no matter what. I mean, hopefully you're still here, right? 10 years from now, you're going to be 10 years older no matter what. The question isn't whether you're going to age. The question is, what kind of body are you going to be aging in? A stronger one or a weaker one? A more capable one or a more fragile one? And look, here's the deal. Here's the brutal truth. That choice is being made right now. One workout at a time, one meal at a time, one walk at a time, one decision at a time. And you know what? I think that's incredibly empowering, because it means your future isn't determined by your birthday. It's determined by your habits. All right. So before we wrap this up, I want to challenge you with one final thought. For decades, the fitness industry has convinced us that our goal should be to get smaller, to lose weight, to shrink, to take up less space. I think that's the wrong goal. After 50, your mission isn't to become smaller. Your mission is to become harder to kill. It's to become stronger, more capable, more resilient, more difficult for disease and injury and frailty and aging to take you down. That's the game. And when you start viewing health through that lens, I think everything changes. You stop asking, how much do I weigh? And you start asking, how capable am I becoming? And look, that's a much, much better question. So this week, here's my challenge for you. Don't focus on losing weight. Focus on building strength. Maybe that means for some of you joining a gym. Maybe it means picking up a pair of dumbbells. Maybe it means eating more protein. Maybe it means finally starting the strength training program that you've been putting off. I don't care where you start. Just start, because every workout is a deposit. Every protein-rich meal is a deposit. Every year of consistency is a deposit. And one day, the future version of you will be living off those investments. All right, guys, that's our show for this week. So until next week, guys, stay strong. Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you are over 50 and you feel frustrated or stuck and you want a clear plan, then I invite you to book a free clarity call with me. You guys can find a link to learn more in the show notes for this episode. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on, or head over to silveredgefitness.com/427. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and please consider subscribing and following so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show. Come on, Kev. From the top. As we wrap up our time. Come on, Kev. Remember how to do this? As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways.